stopped trying to settle Florida until 1565. You see, in 1564, King Philip II of Spain found out something the French did that really bugged him, other than being French. You know what they did? They built a fort here on Spanish territory about 30 miles north of here, and they called it Fort Caroline. King Philip said, no way, ain't gonna have that. Get off my land, Frenchies. But he probably said it in Spanish. So to get the French off of his land, King Philip sent an army over here in 1565, led by a general named Pedro Menendez. Pedro, he lives really close to the Fountain of Youth. So listen, this tree was already here when Ponce named this place Florida back in 1513, growing right here smack dab in the middle of this parking lot that wasn't here yet. So how did they find the age of a tree? I'll be a science teacher for you a minute. They drilled into the middle of the tree and pulled out a plug and counted the rings on the tree. Each ring represents... No. I saw somebody lean towards their kid like they were going to kiss the kid on the cheek. These trees really work. I moved here from West Virginia 4 years ago. First week in town, I gave my beautiful wife. Now that stuff hanging from the trees we call Spanish moss, but I got to tell you the truth as a science teacher, right? It ain't Spanish. It ain't even moss. It's actually an air plant. It does not harm the trees, but it does have lots of little bugs in it. Don't take any home in your suitcase as a souvenir. And by the way, occasionally the Spanish moss grows me a new pair of shoes. Check them out right there. They're not ripe yet. Those are my new golf shoes. They have to develop their spikes before I pick them. All right, coming up on your left, one of the best coffee shops in town, a fantastic cup of Cuban coffee over here. This place is called the Fountain of Juice. Now, their name was so creative, the people across the street named their museum the Fountain of Youth to rhyme with the place across the street. Fountain of Youth, I know it works, folks. When I moved here from West Virginia 4 years ago, I was retired and 83 years old. I started drinking from the fountain 3 times a day, which was too much. Drank myself all the way back to 55 years old. I should have stopped at about 70 and stayed retired. This is not just the fountain where you can take a drink and feel young all over again. It's also an archaeological dig site. They found the Native American village called Savoy sat on this land about 5,000 years before the Spanish ever arrived. Now, if you want a little bit of extra proof that the fountain actually works, look at the young man in the gray t-shirt over there. That's my great-grandfather. Dropped him off at 5:30 this morning. He's been drinking all day. And that peacock yells at me every time I come through the park here. There's the peacock. You got to peek between the cars over there. You might see him walking along. All right, I want to talk to you about building materials here in St. Augustine. I know what you're thinking. Alex, I didn't buy a ticket to Home Depot. It's okay. This is my bonus to you. Building material time. So when the Spanish started building here, they built out of what they could find, which was wood. But after that, they found this stuff that these pillars are made of on my left and right. You see these pillars? Those are made from coquina. That's a naturally formed material. It's tiny little shells that got compressed together under the ocean's pressure for a couple of 100,000 years. Spanish found this stuff in the ground, started digging blocks of it out and drying it out. It would harden up like rock, and they started building everything in this town out of coquina. But for a while, the King of Spain ruined it by charging a coquina tax. You know how they got around paying the coquina tax? They stopped building with coquina and made their own shell walls like this one on your right. That material is called tabia. That's oyster shells with crushed limestone, sand, and water. They'd mix it up, put it in a mold, and let it dry out in the hot Florida sun. So that was a tax-saving law. All right, listen, we're turning on to William Street. They've asked us not to be on our microphones because they get annoyed listening to us. I get it. So I'll meet you at the far end of the street. I pointed to, I think that might have been the last red train driver who talked on this road. All right, so listen, in the 1880s, rich oil company man Henry Flagler showed up here to build a hotel. but he built it too close to the local jail. He asked the city to build a new jail a mile outside of town so it wouldn't disturb Henry's hotel guests. The city said, we can't afford a new jail. Henry said, I can. Take my money. So they took Henry Flagler's money and they built a new jail a mile north of town. And we're about to visit the parking lot of that jail. When I make the right turn after I'm going straight again, you're going to see the old jail that was completed in the late 1800s straight out in front of you. It is now the Old Jail Museum, where you can learn all about jail life here in St. Augustine. See the bars in the upstairs windows? There's no bars on the right side because that's actually the warden's house attached to the jail. This jail ran until about 1950, closed down, and opened right back up as the Old Jail Museum, and it's still a museum today. All right, let me talk to you about building materials again. So when the Spanish first arrived, they didn't know about that coquina stuff in the ground they could build with. They built this town out of what they could find, and being a jungle, they found lots of wood. That's right, they built wooden houses, wooden fences, wooden bridges, and wooden forts. Well, if you're from anywhere in the Deep South, you know that places like Florida don't like wood. In fact, Florida eats wood. We've got termites, carpenter ants, carpenter beetles. We've got humidity that can rot wood, and fire that can burn wood. Thank you, folks. In the first 107 years of St. Augustine's history, we went through 9 wooden forts. That's right, 9 forts had to be rebuilt in 107 years. After the 9th fort was burned down by a British attacker named Robert Searles, the Spanish said, we need a stronger fort. Well, yeah, they did. Luckily, that's when they discovered that coquina stuff in the ground. And in 1672, they started building our first non-wooden fort. Now, the fort wasn't hard to build, a lot like the forts I built for my 3 sons over the years, which simply means it took 23 years to complete. That's right, 1672 to 1695. But that fort still stands today. It is run by the National Park Service. It's called the Castillo de San Marcos. Now, after they built the fort out of coquina, they started using coquina to build everything else in this town, and they built with coquina till the mid-1930s, when it became illegal to dig coquina out of the ground. Can you dig it? No, you can't. That's right, it is now illegal to dig coquina out of the ground because they realized the special brand of coquina we were finding in St. Augustine was only being found 2 places in the whole world. Florida's East Coast and Puerto Rico, so it is now a protected material. So in 1937, they finished our last coquina building. It was a civic center in the middle of the town where they'd have dances, concerts, and meetings. That means for you, they don't have dances there anymore. Really, you don't see me try out my dance moves, but you can go into that building to get information because that's the information center is located in town today. Alright, so when the city was first built, they needed more protection than just the fort. So they built a wall around St. Augustine. That's right, this was a walled city for protection. And along that wall, well, first of all, the wall was made out of palm tree logs. It was about 18 feet high. And it had small Spanish forts all along the edges of the wall called redoubts, manned 24 hours a day by soldiers with muskets. Now, this palm log wall protected the town. Problem is, it also held the people inside town. So if you wanted to get out of town, you had to enter an exit with the one gate at the north end of the city. That's right, with a gate at the north end of the city inside the wall. You know what we call it, because we're really good at naming things? The Northern City Gate. That's right, the Northern City Gate for a while had a drawbridge in it over a small moat. And every night when it got dark, the Spanish soldiers who guarded the town would close and lock that drawbridge. They had strict instructions never to open it at night. So let's imagine you came out here into the wild and you were hunting. You better get home by dark, because if not, they locked you out. They would not leave 37. Now look left and forward, and you can see the oldest coquina building in St. Augustine, the Castillo de San Marcos. That fort has protected us for all of those years. Now, the city wall I told you about, you can see palm logs coming off the fort. That's exactly where our colonial city wall used to sit. It ran along the north edge of town, and right here on our left, these pillars, this was the city gate. This is where the drawbridge was in colonial times that was locked every night at dark. So you might be wondering, hey Alex, why did they use palm tree logs to build the wall? Well, look at this sample of the wall on our right. This is not the original wall. This sample of the wall was built in 1972. Do you see any rotted palm logs at the base of that wall? That's because it's made out of concrete. But the original city wall was made out of palm logs because the Spaniards discovered that palm tree logs didn't rot as quickly here in Florida's humidity as some of the other wood that grew in the area. All right, burger buckets. I see a bunch of people looking and talking about when you're walking around later. So you are now safe inside the city wall if this was colonial times. And you got those city gates coming up on our left where those two pillars are. That is not the original set of city gates. That set was built in 1908, 100 years later, the city was tearing down all of our protective walls. We didn't need them anymore. But these gates got protected, these pillars, by a local women's group who chained themselves to those pillars and said, we're not moving until we're promised they won't be torn down. And you can look through those gates straight down North St. George Street. That's a great place to walk and shop, not have to worry about cars, because there ain't no cars allowed on North St. George Street. It is pedestrian traffic only. You've got museums and gift shops and restaurants. The oldest wooden schoolhouse in the United States, right down about 100 feet down that street right there. So the fort, I told you, was built by the Spanish. But it was not always a Spanish fort. It was a British fort in the middle of the 1700s when Great Britain took over Florida for about 23 years. Then at the end of the American Revolution, the newly formed United States gave Florida back to Spain. So Florida was controlled by Spain for a second time until 1821 when the United States purchased Florida from Spain. That's the year we became a U.S. territory, and that fort became property of the United States. You want to check out some great museums in town? That's one of them right over there at the fort. It's a fantastic history museum. And then you want to cross the street and you want to learn about St. Augustine's pirate history right over here on my right at the Pirate and Treasure Museum. Some real pirate artifacts on display in there, including an actual skull and crossstone flag that was proven to have flown over top of a pirate ship. Yes, there were multiple pirate raids into St. Augustine over the years. And over here on the right, the Colonial Coat of the Colonial History Museum right there is also fantastic. All right, it's the end of May. It's going to be like over 90 degrees today. Let's talk about air conditioning. Did you know when this city was first designed in the 1500s, it was designed with a central air conditioning system? Don't call me a liar. You're not wearing masks anymore. I can see your mouths when you call me that. Listen, the Spanish knew about that sea breeze. There's almost always a slight breeze off the Atlantic Ocean here, sometimes a downright wind. The Spanish took advantage of that by designing this city with narrow streets, knowing that narrow streets meant the buildings would be close together, and they knew that buildings close together would grab that breeze, change its pressure, and whip it around the middle of town on a hot summer day and cool it down. That was colonial central air conditioning. In fact, Spain built all of their cities throughout the Caribbean when they were settling over here with narrow streets for that same purpose, to cool the city. So here we are on the narrow Hippolyta Street, and no, this is not the narrowest street in town. That honor went to Treasury Street when the city was built, where they actually located the King's Treasury, storing gold and things before it was sent back across the Atlantic Ocean to Spain. So Treasury Street was the narrowest street when the city was designed. More restaurants than you can shake a stick at around the middle of St. Augustine. Check about 20 of them out today. Fill yourself up. I know, why would you want to shake a stick at a restaurant? But hey, if that's your thing, go for it. So I told you about some of the great museums that share St. Augustine's history. Right in the middle of town, we have a museum that has absolutely nothing to do with our own history. You know what we have? Catty corner from this stop sign, in the second floor of that yellow building, we have the Medieval Torture Museum. Yes, we have a Medieval Torture Museum in beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. You guys want to take my picture? You want to take my picture? Church, I said, give me your church. You see, he had already purchased them a new piece of land 2.5 blocks away and already planned to build them any church they wanted with his very own money. So the Methodists took Henry's offer, and while he was building his first Hotel in St. Augustine. He was also supervising construction of the brand new Grace United Methodist. Check out that bell tower. That's Terra